Hey everyone, Rho here. Today we discuss the infamous duel between the lion and the wolf. Who was at fault? Who came out the victor? And just what were the repercussions? General spoiler warning to begin, as we will be discussing events from across the Warhammer 40k universe, as well as events specifically from the Horus Heresy Primarch novel Leman Russ, the Great Wolf. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Now, earlier in the week, we discussed how the seeds for the Lion and Russ's feud were truly laid in the days preceding their infamous duel. Arriving to the homeworld of the enemy, Russ found he had been beaten to his prize by the Lion and the Dark Angels. And despite being annoyed by this, the Space Wolves fleet fell in to support their legionary cousins. Unfortunately, tragedy struck. One of the Space Wolf captains, in his eagerness to destroy the enemy, destroyed an enemy vessel containing 10 squads of boarded Dark Angels. While he obviously didn't know this was the case, he did rashly ignore the Dark Angels' attempts at warning him, and enraged by the loss of their kin, the Dark Angels begun firing on the Space Wolves vessel. Now, as we know, this situation was only diffused by Leman Russ himself appealing to his brother L. Johnson. And once informed of the deaths his men had caused, Russ offered to apologise to his brother's face. And that's exactly what Russ did. Now, while from the outside this could have been said to resolve the situation, which it absolutely did, it also undoubtedly further widened the gap between the two Primarchs. Where before it was two proud generals butting heads, now there was a legitimate bitterness beneath the surface. Underlying, but there nonetheless. Now, with the void above Dulan secured, their attention could turn to the final stronghold upon the surface, and together the Lion and Russ devised their strategy. The Dark Angels would secure the outer perimeters, while Russ would have the honour of taking out the main fortress. The head of the snake belonged to the Wolf King. And that's the point worth remembering here. The Lion concedes to Russ that he will be the one to cut off the head of the snake. And this is quite an interesting conversation between the two, as they both reflect on their different ways of war. For Russ, it is very personal. He and his legion were made for vengeance, a wrathful judgment of fire for those who oppose their father. For Lion L. Johnson, however, it is simple, cold calculation and order. He cares nothing for who or what the enemy is, just the objectives at hand. And it dawns on Russ in this moment just how different he and his brother are. These two brothers of the same genetic legacy, and yet they could be no more further apart. And Russ asks his brother if he thinks Malcador knew that they would meet here. And that's a real interesting reflection of Russ. L. Johnson is kind of nonplussed, clearly not quite having the same faults as him. But I think it's mentioned for a reason here, that Malcador had indeed intended for these two brothers to meet here, for Leman Russ to see his brother's way of war, but also too, for the Lion to see the Wolf Kings. As Russ himself comes to the conclusion, these two brothers couldn't really be any further apart in nature. They really represent two very different extremes. And while that can be a good thing in many ways, it also has its drawbacks. Russ, all passion and fury, yet at times can lose sight of the larger picture. The lion ice cold and calculating, yet withdrawn to the point of numbness, unable to relate to those around him. It really wouldn't surprise me at all for Malcador to have orchestrated this meeting in the slightest, and it really makes perfect sense when taking into account him claiming he had nothing to do with the lion being placed on the campaign. He may not have called for it, but he most certainly allowed it. Malcador the Sigillite, always the conductor behind the scenes. Now, with the plan agreed, the attack commenced, and ultimately the enemy's citadel was breached. Russ and the wolves racing towards its summit and its final confrontation, while the Dark Angels secured the outer limits, preventing reinforcements from gaining access. However, here one fateful action would again shape so much. As the Space Wolves pause in their ascent, Russ believing he has the time to deal with a Legion issue, the Lion sees the opportunity to teleport into the Citadel and eliminate the enemy commander. And this is just like a moth to a flame. The Lion sees the opportunity before him, and every instinct he has is screaming to teleport in and finish the job. His legionary Aleos knows what his Primarch is considering, and just how badly that would go over with Russ. The Lion had given his word. And so he offers his Primarch counsel, trying to tactfully advise his lord to contact his brother instead, which the Lion concedes to do, however ultimately unable to reach the wolves and his patience wearing thin. The Lion teleports in to the summit and takes the ruler's head for himself. Now, how you feel about this act is of course going to be different for everyone. Some will see the Lion's actions as the logical move to make. To him, Russ had stopped, and the opportunity was too good to miss. For others, he had given his word to a brother. The battle was going to be won ultimately anyway. He did not have to take the opportunity just because it was there. Even his own legionary knew it was the wrong thing to do. There are some things in life that matter more than opportunity, more than results, such as the trust of a brother, the bond of family. For me, you of course expect me to say Russ, and yes, I do. However, the truth is, you know I'm a big fan of both of these Primarchs. I've raved about the Lion on the channel, and I can understand why the Lion wanted to take the opportunity that presented itself. But the problem is here. He gave his word. And that's the problem with the Lion. He just doesn't have that part of him that connects. That emotional resonance. To him, promising Russ he can slay the enemy ruler means nothing. To him at this point, having a brother means nothing. And I really think that's why Malcador orchestrated this meeting of the brothers. This really wasn't solely for Russ's benefit. This was why the Lion needed this encounter with Russ, in an attempt to get that emotional resonance. As Russ would see the calculating aspect of the Lion, so too could the Lion see the emotion of Russ. And in a strange twist of fate, it actually would work. It would build a bond and bridge between these two very different Primarchs. Unfortunately, it wouldn't happen until after the heresy. And as we know right here, it would only end in a fight. Now, the reason that Russ stalled his advance is because he had to deal with an outbreak of wolfen. So he's already in the midst of a very emotional situation when he hears word of his brother's actions. By the time he reaches the throne room, he is of course beyond livid. And one of the very first words out of his mouth as he's storming through the door is, "Do oaths mean nothing to you?" And he couldn't be more right. For all the Lion's knightly order, for all his traditions and skill with a blade, to me again, without that emotion inside him, the true aspect of what it means to be a knight escapes him. Now Russ continues into the room, just disbelieving his brother broke his word, and the Lion just stands there, cold and aloof as ever, basically telling Russ, well, you took too long. And as angry and irate as Russ is, I'm not sure a fight was a foregone certainty here, as Russ, for all his words, doesn't just smack the Lion as soon as he has the chance. If the Lion had done anything in way of apologising, or even just telling his brother they tried their best to contact him, that they saw he had stopped and didn't want to lose the opportunity. Just any form of contrition here, any form of sorrow. But of course with the Lion, that's just not going to happen. And instead, he makes a remark about the company that Russ keeps. Undoubtedly a jabbing comment, subtly letting Russ know he's seen the wolfen curse. And honestly, I don't know many Primarchs, let alone Russ, where this would not have resulted in a fight. And as history would tell us, that's exactly what happened. The famous duel of the Lion and the Wolf. Although in truth, duel is probably not the best terminology, as it's much more of a brawling fight. You've got the Space Wolves yelling and cheering, the Dark Angels standing there in silence before finally getting the picture and joining in, and the two Primarchs just absolutely going at each other with blades drawn. Russ is described as the stronger, but the Lion the quicker. And it's an even contest with the two both getting their fair share of shots in. However, to me it's clear, despite all the anger, neither is fighting to slay the other. And I say this because the verbal jousting between the two continues throughout. This is an angry battle of brothers. And there's quite an ironic moment as the Lion tells Russ he can't be trusted. That Malcador can't trust him. That's why they sent for him. Which, given the whole fight has occurred because the Lion broke his trust, well, again, that's just pretty ironic. As their battle continues, the Lion, the ever skillful duelist with a blade, disarms Russ of his chainsword, knocking it away. And in another great piece of insight into how maybe the Lion just can't quite grasp the emotion of the moment, as if he doesn't quite realise this is a fight, not a duel, it mentions how he doesn't follow it up with a strike, and Russ just rugby tackles him to the ground, waylaying in the punches before tossing him across the hall. And their fight goes on, the two Primarchs just absolutely battering each other, even sending them both tumbling over the edge of the fortress. They're just completely and absolutely exhausted, yet still swinging in the punches. And then, having cracked the Lion's helm, Russ sees an opportunity. How he could press the advantage and beat the Lion down to his knees. However, instead, he laughs. In the mud, the rain, the filth, Russ begins to laugh. the whole ridiculousness of the situation. And for me, it's that opportunity that does so. The lion saw the opportunity, and he took it, regardless of the consequences. It's what got them into this whole mess in the first place. And here, Russ almost considered the same, and then it hits him. And in true Wolf King style, he can only laugh. As we know, whilst Russ would throw his head back to the skies and laugh, a confused and irate lion would strike him cold and leave. As much as the lion's actions may have caused this fight, which they absolutely did, I don't think we can overlook or forget the incident beforehand, the battle in space. In that Space Wolf captain's actions, in costing Dark Angel lives, it cemented everything within L. Johnson's mind that he'd always believed. Every doubt, every jibe, it elevated the lion's belief of superiority, and it stoked the flames of resentment in Russ. So, in truth, the two Primarchs and the two Legions equally played their part in this brawl of brothers. As we know, ultimately the two would go on to become far better friends, dare I say it, even true brothers. However, unfortunately, this would only transpire after the darkness of the heresy, in the grief of losing their father. And for how much time before the lion's ultimate disappearance? Well, we'll just have to wait and see. Who won this fight? Well, if it was an honor duel of Caliban, it appears L. Johnson. If it was a brawl of Fenris, it certainly implied Russ had the opportunity. And really how suitable that is for both the natures of these Primarchs. Two extremes of the same legacy. Where the fault truly lies is as always down to personal opinion. But undoubtedly to me, the two natures of both had their equal parts to play. As always guys, what do you think? The duel of the lion and the wolf. Was this always destined to happen? Could it have been avoided? Was the lion truly to blame? Or does Russ share an equal amount of responsibility? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below, I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.